now, here are your hosts, Janet Hickox and Roger Wetzel.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Roger.
Hi, Janet. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Glad it is cooling down here in the Northwest, I'll tell you that.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not made for the heat.
No, and you moved up here from Southern California where ideally it should have been hotter there than here, but it seems like it's been upside down this summer.
Yeah, it's been hotter here and raining there. So go figure.
Yeah, I suppose they need the rain though. So here we are again today on Empower You Media, where we are going to be talking about the secrets of Aboriginal healing and the secrets of Aboriginal awakening. And this is kind of still in our series of healing paths, but I think this one brings us to a sort of mystical and magical quality that we haven't really had as much of yet. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to bring in our guest, Robbie Holz. Hello, Robbie.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
Hi, Robbie.
Great. Hi, Roger. Hi, Janet.
So Robbie Holz and I go back a ways. Geez, Louise, back to maybe 2003, 2004, 5, maybe. Goodness, a long time ago.
Yeah.
I had the actual privilege of meeting your husband, Gary, and an interesting man, to be sure. And of course, he plays a big part in both of these books and that you've written. And we're going to be talking about those today. But first, let me read a little bit about Robbie. And then, Robbie, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little more about you, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
So Robbie Holz is an international speaker, holistic consultant, and award-winning author of the memoirs, Secrets of Aboriginal Healing and Aboriginal Secrets of Awakening. Using Australian Aboriginal principles, she healed herself of hepatitis C and fibromyalgia. Robbie has also participated in ceremonies with Aboriginal tribeswomen in the Australian outback. Through her global speaking events, private consultations, popular online self-healing course, and award-winning books, Robbie helps others awaken their powerful inner healer and also achieve a higher consciousness. Tips on body, mind, spirit wellness can be found at www.holzwellness.com. And toward the end of our hour here with you today, Robbie, I will give you a chance to share your email and contact information or whatever information you'd like to put out there for people.
Okay.
So very much, we want to welcome you to Empower You Media.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I was telling you a little bit before the show, I just finished the second book today, or at least had gone through to the very last page, to the very last drop of the Aboriginal Secrets of Awakening. Excellent book. But the first book in the series was about the secrets of Aboriginal healing. So why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory as to how that book started and how you got to be an author of this kind of work in the first place?
Okay.
Why Aboriginal stuff?
Yeah, really. It's a bit far removed from Edmonds, Washington. Well, Secrets of Aboriginal Healing came about because my husband's journey into the outback, he had multiple sclerosis and was actually a quadriplegic where he had no feeling from the neck down. And the doctors told him that he really didn't have much time left, that the multiple sclerosis was killing him. So they didn't have any answers for him, and he was desperate to stay alive. And he'd heard that the outback Aborigines in Australia had remarkable healing gifts. So this skeptical scientist went into the outback in his wheelchair because he was so desperate to stay alive. And in 10 days' time with the tribe, he regained the feeling that he hadn't had for 7 years in his body. And he increased his mobility, and it just totally transformed him. And the Aborigines asked him to take their healing secrets out into the world because we civilized tribes don't really understand how healing works. So they gifted their ancient wisdom to him, and we have taken that information out, and it's done. People really resonate with it because it's now in over 35 countries and being translated into different languages because it's very simple, but it's effective. And it's the same principles, whether you're healing or for anything else. The Aborigines really rely on these 5 steps for everything.
Well, let's go ahead and just jump in and tell us what these 5 steps are, because I thought it was too simple. I mean, my Western mind wanted to make this much more difficult.
Yeah.
And then you read these 5 steps and I went, oh no, it can't be that easy.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. And it is true. And I find that the more I use this beautiful wisdom that these Aborigines have, the better my life gets. And that's including simplifying my life, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is, the book takes us through Gary's healing journey, and so it gives these healing steps so that it's accessible to anybody. But the first step is willingness. Are you willing to heal? Because some people have secondary gains. They may not be ready to get better. They may not want that responsibility. The second step is awareness. You have to understand that it's here for a reason. The physical is just simply a sign of what the emotional has created. And so the Aborigines will tell you that you've got to get to the underlying root. Otherwise it's like picking the top of a dandelion. It's going to come right back again. We all know people who have had tumors removed only to have them return because they haven't really removed that emotional core. So that's what the physical is. It's kind of like the emotions are like a dashboard warning where that light's starting to blink. And if you keep ignoring it long enough, now that light's on all the time, and that's called a physical disease. So that's the second step, is having an awareness of why is this here. The third step is acceptance. You may not like it, but it's here for a reason. And if you recognize that we're souls currently embodied in a physical form, there is much to learn from these challenges. Some of the most painful experiences are some of our best teachers. So have an acceptance that this challenge is in your life for a reason. It's here to help you grow and evolve. And the fourth is empowerment. Take back your power. If I had, I had a blood transfusion when I delivered my son back in '85, and I ended up with hepatitis C from that blood transfusion. And that almost killed me. And then the experimental treatment the doctors put me on almost killed me. And if I had believed what the doctors believed at that time, I don't think I would have survived. I think I really would have, I know I wouldn't have made it. So, but I was determined to find answers like Gary. So I struck out and on my own and decided found out that there's all kinds of answers, and I have healed myself of those things. But I had to take my power back and be responsible for my health. And also the other thing about the empowerment is recognizing there's tremendous help on the other side of the veil, tremendous help. But it's a free will planet. They can't just barge in. You have to ask for that. But it's so available they always respond if you just ask. So, and then finally, the fifth one is focus on what you want. If you don't give any energy to what you don't want, it's not about a head in the sand kind of thing, but there's that quote about Mother Teresa would never go to an anti-war rally, only pro-peace, because she didn't want to give any energy to the war.
Right.
And it's the same thing with all these politicians now. Just don't give them any energy except the one that you want. So focus on being well, not focusing on the disease. If you're focused on the pain and the symptoms, you're just going to create more of that. Quantum physics. The Aborigines have been doing what a lot of the scientists are starting to catch up with.
I just think that's so funny. I mean, we go to the outback, he goes to the outback and discovers this wisdom of these people that is incredible compared to all of the knowledge that we in the Western world believe we have access to. And that it is so simple to really, in effect, heal yourself.
Right.
And I think what makes this whole experience so credible is that I know you two. Mm-hmm. And so when you're relating stories in the first book about how your sister, her vision was restored, and things like that, it's so close to home that I completely believe it.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly believable. And I think you write it in a way too, Robbie, that's incredibly believable. I know you wrote that book also with Gary. And
then the second book with Christiane. And honestly, it was one of those where if you didn't live there and see these miraculous things happening, you wouldn't believe it. And so I was blessed that one of my sisters came and lived with us, and she got to see these things happening, because our minds aren't used to these miraculous things happening, but they do happen. They can happen. And once you're used to it, you start seeing it more and more all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. How easy was it for you to heal yourself of hepatitis C? I mean, it's like Janet said, these are all seem to be very simple steps, but as I listen to you and reflect on these, it's not as easy as it appears.
Yeah.
So how easy was it for you to do this, and what kind of resistance did you have to get past to heal yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you need to understand that at this point, after I had been on this experimental treatment, I was a mess. I couldn't get out of bed for 9 months. I had a lot of treatment-induced brain damage. I couldn't finish a sentence because I didn't know what I was talking about. I was really, and doctors didn't know what to do with me at this point. Nobody had been on this kind of treatment for more than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, and I'd been on it for like 5 years. And so then they learned, oh, okay, I guess we can't do that long. But I was really a hot mess. So it took a while, and it took finding different people who could help. And you got to remember, I was this very conservative, Midwestern, Catholic, working in the court system person like Gary, and he was a skeptical physicist. We had to step out of the box and realize that there's a lot out there that exists that can't be proven, and started finding that the only people that I was finding any improvement with were doing something I didn't even know what they were doing. And that's what we describe in that book, Awakening, the Awakening book. They were moving blocked energy. They were doing all kinds of things. I didn't have any idea what was going on. I just knew I felt better. But to answer your question, Roger, I was in pretty bad shape. It took a couple of years to really kind of come around again and be able to function. And the second book talks about that. But I really had to learn to pay attention to the body and love myself back, because before I had really been ignoring my physical needs, really not listening to the emotions. I was running on stress and thought I thrived on it. And I love how the Aborigines have really very beautifully told us that anything can be healed, anything, if the body, mind, and spirit are aligned, anything. And sometimes the soul, the spirit, is not aligned with healing. But for most people, it is. And most people, their bodies are just crumbling under the emotional weight that it's having to deal with. So you have to pay attention to all three of those. And once I aligned those, my soul, of course, was aligned with healing, because I didn't realize at the time I would be spending the rest of my life teaching people
Exactly.
they can heal themselves. Yeah.
You know, I think there was something really interesting in the whole of this paradigm shift that you and Gary both go through. And that was that there was this realization that something else was at work behind the scenes that created this disease. It wasn't just a bunch of germs or luck of the draw. In Gary's case, it comes down to an emotional type of thing. Yes. He'd shut off emotions. Can you speak to that a little bit and tell us how that disease develops and how he gets through this?
Yes, and some people may find this controversial, but it's like 98% of the time there's an emotional core. And even to my blood transfusion with hepatitis C, there's an emotional core there. So Gary had a really abusive childhood. His father was an alcoholic who beat him on a regular basis. And Gary learned, with that brilliant mind of his, how to numb himself emotionally. It was his survival tactic, until he literally, over the years, numbed himself physically. And it's so interesting. If you go to some of these books, there's a couple of fabulous books. Louise Hay has one. I think it's called Heal Your Body. There's another one from an Australian healer. I can't think of it. But it's the emotional cores. They are so... it's the same thing. The body will, the energy gets blocked very specifically. We tend to hold the emotion of grief in our chest. And if you're holding a lot of grief and you're not releasing it, and you have a family history of heart disease or breast cancer, you really need to be aware of that, because you already have a bit of a vulnerability. So it's very specific where the energy gets blocked. And I'm a bit of an overachiever. So I had fibromyalgia, which is the entire system. And then usually, I'm not going to just center on one area of the body. Let's just go for the whole thing. But what that does is, when you have fibromyalgia, most of the people who have that, they've had tremendous stress, and it's throughout their whole system. And I've noticed that fibromyalgia is growing more and more, and now teenagers are starting to have it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's just, it's very interesting how the body's responding to the emotions. The doctors will tell you that if you have 15 minutes of stress, that lowers your immune system for 24 hours. They are so connected. Your body and emotions are very connected. So you need to pay attention, because you're creating a different kind of cell depending on the emotion that you have. If you have fear-based negative emotions, it creates a different type of cell. I don't know if you remember Dr. Emoto's water experiments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And remember how when there was fear or anger directed at that energy directed at that water, it was like a very discombobulated cell. And so when you have this negative response or fear-based, and guilt and self-hatred are the most toxic to the body, it creates a cell that's it's like a slacker cell. It's very sticky and gunky. It lowers your vibration. It creates this swampy, perfect breeding ground for disease. And more love-based cells, Dr. Emoto showed they were like a beautiful snowflake. Yeah. They're very symmetrical. They're high-functioning. They're a higher vibration. And disease can't sustain in that higher vibrational state. So the best emotions to have to heal are gratitude. That's a really high vibrational emotion to have. And forgiveness, love. But it's more love-based emotions that will bring you up into these higher consciousness states, but also these higher vibrations, and that'll heal you faster.
Now, I mean, your life was on fire at that point in time, right? When you came up with hepatitis C, I mean, you were working a full-time job, you were engaged in all different kinds of activities, you had a son you were raising, and just because you wanted more fun, you decided to build a house.
That sounds like something you do, Janet.
And not very well, I can imagine. I probably would break too.
Yeah.
So this created the situation for you for that hepatitis C to take hold. Is that kind of that?
Yeah. And here's the thing. I remember taking a deposition of a doctor, and it always stayed with me. He was an oncologist, and I remember him telling us that science knows that when he said, whenever I look back into the history of somebody who has cancer, the past year they've had sustained stress. 3 months, 6 months, but they've had sustained stress. And so that was sort of a perfect storm, building this home, closing down my business, and then realizing that the new job may not be there, working way too many hours, raising a child. It was just way too much, and sustaining it for months after months after months through a number of synchronistic weird events. It just brought that dormant hepatitis C out, which I didn't even know that I had. Yeah, and I was actually grateful that it came out, because some of the people that received it through transfusions back in the 80s are just discovering now that they have hepatitis. I was actually lucky that it came out 5 years later, because otherwise it would have done a lot of damage over 40 years.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah.
But I guess my whole point in bringing that up was that just because you were exposed to it doesn't necessarily mean that you were going to eventually come down with it no matter what. If there were specific triggers that happened that opened the doorway or the pathway for this to manifest. Is that true?
Right, exactly.
So yay, though you may have the gene for cancer somewhere, it doesn't necessarily have to turn on.
Exactly. And I think this is where it's a body, mind, spirit. This is what the Aborigines want us to know. I really believe and understand that my soul's journey required me to have that blood transfusion, to go through almost dying twice and learning how to heal myself, so that I would then be on this passionate journey of teaching other people.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention to what's the soul's role in this. What is it? Is it here to help me grow, help me evolve? There's reasons. All three are equally involved in the healing process.
So, Roger, if you have a question, feel free to jump in. You know me, I'll just keep talking.
No, I think right now this is a good time to take a break.
Okay.
Good point. So let's take a break.
And then we'll be right back.
We'll be right back.